Zuschauerinnen, Zuschauer, liebe
Well,
Freundinnen und Freunde.
dear friends of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, welcome to the third event in the series Where's Europe in, this time with Anna Deparnay-Grunenberg. So welcome, Anna, and with your colleagues, Sergei Lagodinsky and Sven Giegold. We already conducted two events about basic rights and infrastructure, and we basically stick to the topic infrastructure and now want to talk about mobility. And those of you who've joined us for the third time know that there will be a simultaneous interpretation. And at the bottom of your screen, you can click on the little globe and select the language.
Participated already, you know that you can switch languages with the help of the small globe down on the screen. And so you are invited. Sie sind herzlich eingeladen.
You are invited to participate, of course. We will have a relaxed conversation, and we would like to make use of the expertise of Anna and talk about a topic that affects us on a daily basis. And if you have a question or want to make a comment, please use the Q&A tool at the bottom. And in the background, we have Nina Locher, who will take care of your questions, and I will be happy to pick them up and bring them up here. So what kind of means of transportation have you used today, Anna? Well, today I've stayed at home, none of the means at all. So I went to the outside to the dustbin, and yesterday, for example, I took the e-bike. So in Stuttgart, this is actually the first choice of mine to take the bike. Well, this brings up a very important point. You've been part of the city council for 10 years in Stuttgart, then you were elected for the European Parliament. So you are the right person to know and to see what is happening at the European level and what kind of impact does this have on the municipal level, because you know it from both sides. And in addition, you're also a member of the Committee on Traffic and or Transportation and Tourism, and you're also a member of the Committee on Agriculture and Rural Development. And another very important topic of yours is railway. And looking back to the past year, we've seen that the pandemic has actually had a major impact on us, on our self-determination and freedom of movement. And this had an impact on personal contacts. And of course, mobility was also affected by it. And so this has never happened before. And what does this mean from a basic rights point of view is what we've talked about last time. And now we want to talk about the mobility sector as such. So Anna, what's your experience? What kind of changes do you see in mobility or in the behavior of people? So before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after the pandemic, if you could briefly reflect on that. Well, of course, we do notice that people like me, I mean, usually I would be in Brussels today, and I reduced my mobility, my personal mobility. But when I go to Brussels, because I have to go there and have to defend a dossier, for example, in the plenum, or I have to conduct a trialogue, then I go to Strasbourg or Brussels again, but I minimize these trips. And also in my environment, also at home, my husband, for example, is in home office too, and they will only or not restart with their normal office hours until September. And so, of course, slowly but gradually, we have to think about how we want to maintain home office, or how many trips we want to take in the future, and how many times do we want to meet with people. So many things will change. And so as Greens, we always wanted to achieve more flexibility. So now it will be quite interesting how society will react to different possibilities, and also to different forces, different pressures. So as I said, the other day I had a trialogue in Brussels and I did it online. However, I was not at a level playing field as the people who were on the ground. So when there's only one group on the ground and others are joining remotely, then it's always very difficult. So people cannot discuss at a level playing field in these hybrid events. So this means that the social interaction will actually exert pressure when it comes to the question, can we continue with digital, or is this some kind of calculation that has also something to do with climate neutrality, for example, or are we unable to bring in our views in it using digital tools? So on the one hand, we have these digital tiles, and on the other hand, we see a transition towards these hybrid events because not all the organizations and institutions are so perfectly equipped with digital tools that we can have discussions at a level playing field. But this was actually the objective. And what we see is that for people with family, with children, it was quite difficult due to the fact that childcare was limited or stopped that. I mean, they appreciate the fact that they could work from home and could even be better prepared, because when you travel a lot, when you commute a lot, it's also tiring. And I think this is actually a major objective of ours. How can we maintain equality, knowing that interaction is important, that we miss interaction, personal interaction, but we have to prevent a complete switchback, so to speak. So I hope that we will find good paths in order to make use of what we've learned so far and also to prevent unnecessary traffic. And we've also seen another development, Anna, which was quite interesting, and Nina will post it in the chat. So our Brussels office of the Böll Foundation, they published a mobility atlas at the beginning of the year, which resonated well with people. And this is a great product full of interesting information, in particular because it shows data that was non-existent before. So the experience with the pandemic was integrated there and picked up there. And one development which should concern us, or should be of concern to a certain extent, is the increase of individual transportation compared to public transport, in particular when it comes to short distances. Of course, bike sales exploded. The e-bike market actually went to the roof. And this is quite good that people find different ways of mobility for short distances. But at the same time, it's also a little bit problematic when it comes to cars, for example. So what do you think? Will people once again increasingly use public transport in Europe, and what will this depend on? Well, I do think that the new public transport users have been lost recently. In my area, there are some of my colleagues from the FDP, for example, and I saw them when I came from the bus station. They arrived back home in their car, and sometimes they also picked me up, and sometimes we were in a traffic jam, and this was very difficult because in public transport you can read or you can also work. And one of them actually thanked me for the fact that I told him that it's way more comfortable and way more relaxed to take public transport into the city. So people who were difficult to win for public transport, and people who are now afraid of an infection, of course, go back to their old habits. And we see that there are once again more traffic jams in the city centers. This is quite a concern. Now we have to show again that public transport is safe, that the railway is safe, and that people, for example, who do not like masks for whatever reason, they will not use public transports and choose different means of transportation. But I think that public transport will evolve. And here in Stuttgart and elsewhere, we have our manifold lines, bus lines, train lines, etc. And I think that we'll eventually make it, no matter for how long we will have to deal with the pandemic. Of course, for some people, public transport is a no-go because of the pandemic. But I hope that we can win back those people who have switched back to their private cars. And of course, those who are riding the bike can continue to do so. But I think you brought up a very important aspect, and I would like to follow up on that. Before we come back to the question of Desiree, that was brought up in the chat, I mean, you already touched upon new railway lines that are being planned. This is actually one of the prerequisites to have an attractive public transport. And of course, we all know that the planning takes a long time. For just a few kilometers of road, we need 10 years. So we have to accelerate the planning processes, and public transport planning needs to accelerate. So why is the European level so important for it? But we'll talk about that later. And Desiree asked, do you think that hybrid forms in connection with the digital sphere might lead to an exclusion of certain parts of society due to a lack of digital tools? So can this actually exacerbate a digital divide or social divide, basically, due to digital tools? And I would say yes. Because what do you think? Well, I think mobility and also solidarity, this is also the title of our talk today. I mean, I thought a lot about that before this event. And mobility does not only mean physical mobility, it does also mean having an impact in society. Can I go where I want to go? And can I have a say where I want to have a say? And some people simply do not have the opportunity to do this because either it's too complex, or they have the impression they have to give all their data, provide all the data. And this means that some people actually no longer want to participate in the public discourse. And I think this is a very important aspect. And we can also see this in France, in some areas that are well connected. The participation and the interconnection of people is great in contrast to other areas. And this is a very important aspect, participation, and do I feel welcome, and do I have the opportunity to participate? So we have a bad bus connection here where I live. It should come more often, but it's like with the hen and the egg. Of course, every family has at least 2 cars in this vicinity. And we also have some hills here. So the e-bike is actually our savior. But before that, we had this mini bus line, which only goes every 20 minutes to the next train station. And I thought we would need an app in order to pick up other people. And then I thought of some neighbors who would neither have an app, or if they would submit their profile, nobody would pick them up because they look a little bit strange. But if we had such an app, then the bus wouldn't run here at all. So I was thinking about it. We need a certain amount of tools available, because there are always some people who do not have the possibility. I mean, it's similar to Instagram. If you look nice and have a nice profile, you get a lot of stars. And then, of course, you are also taken along, or can take along others, but all the others are left behind, so to speak. And I think that we would actually lose large part of society. And this is why we basically need normal bus connections. and maybe also connections that are supported by apps, but we need a basic bus line, so to speak. Now, on home office, this is also a topic which is a very important topic for Philip Czerny, who is also an author of our Mobility Atlas. And he said, or asks, what's your impression in terms of politics and the trialogue that you have mentioned, this inequality between people who are present and those who join meetings digitally? So is the situation that you've described a specific problem in Brussels that due to the different languages, political backgrounds or personal backgrounds? Is this a specific or a topic that's specific for Brussels, or is it similar at the municipal level, for example? Do you think that this is a problem which is more prominent in Brussels? Well, I think this is rather a human issue. It has nothing or not much to do with diversity. Of course, if you want to meet on a level playing field and speak some globish, so to speak, it helps if you're in the same room. And of course, translation or interpretation helps. But I've also heard of this phenomenon in our city council. They stopped with their Zoom calls or whatever platform they've used, and they meet once again in person. And and some participants who had not participated in the Zoom conferences now joined again. And the noise level when you meet in a room and when you're present there, I mean, this cannot be replaced by a tool, by a technical equipment, even though it's difficult. I mean, simply to enter a discourse and to show your face, I mean, this is hardly possible. I mean, maybe we can learn it, but I think we have to learn to use digital tools to incorporate the chat and to generate a level playing field, so to speak. And now we have to do both things, the space, the room, the presence, your body, but then there's still the people joining via digital means. So we have to bring both things together. So you said it's part of it. So reducing traffic, which we also need to achieve climate neutrality. I mean, this brings up questions that go deep into our social fabric. And I think before the pandemic, we were not really paying attention to it that much. So there are a lot of problems arising and they have to be solved. Now, Jan Schmidt comes to or talks about the topic that we have to talk about now, which is railway. And let's start with the following question. With view to Stuttgart 21, Anna, you know what I'm talking about, or the railway project Turin-Lyon, you also know about that project. So what kind of project or what kind of role should the citizens play when it comes to these projects? And would these projects have been better if the citizen participation had been increased? So it's quite interesting at the European level to talk about the Turin-Lyon case, because it actually reflects the strategy that you pursue. So this is actually a building block, so to speak, of your strategy, but it's not that easy. And can we start with the topic railway network in Europe? What are the difficulties? What are you trying to achieve at the European level? What is happening at the European level? And then to come back to citizens' participation.
Yes, what we are trying to do is to move away from the national systems. That has been the case for decades, that every country, as we know in school, we have our own map and a small French children don't really know what's beyond the border. So that's how the network is being planned. But then you can see at the top right corner of France, it's is in the middle of Europe, and so all these train connections, they thin out then, and that's what you have to see. All these people in the border regions, they have to live with these thinner lines, and we are trying to improve it on a European level to create these TNT corridors and that go through and beyond and the borders, and also when it comes to domestic waterways, and we need it everywhere. We need this railway transport that also create a regional network, and we had a look, and it's not that surprising, but that this Court of Auditor, our official auditor on a European level, had a look at these big projects and has realized that the benefit, when it comes to investment, is very poor, and that means you could, with less money, well, in rail transport is still a lot of money, but you don't have to spend billions, 10 billion as for Stuttgart 21. And so if you look at the categories of 120, 100 or 200 or 300 millions, you could modernize, renovate bridges, etc. And so you could have a go at these low-hanging fruits and have better effect for people in their everyday transport. And I mean, it's quite nice to have a connection that is shorter from, in time from Stuttgart to Budapest. But, how many times does somebody travel from Stuttgart to Budapest? But the border crossing traffic between France and Germany, there people are using it every day. So we have to have a closer look at that. That has to be prioritized and overall we need more digitization, a better rail transport, a rail network, and we have a lot of tasks, and therefore we launched the year of the railways with a lot of joy, and so we have to also consider how much money the taxpayer has to invest in order to reach our climate goals. And so the idea is where we can have a bigger lever, invest or have more effect with fewer sums, lower sums, and also the long-term connections will also benefit from it. And on the other hand, you still have this wonderful project of the night trains, which is also, as you said, Stuttgart, Barcelona, or Stuttgart, Budapest, that is also benefiting from the border crossing railway network. That fits together, but the night trains don't require the mega projects. The night trains and also the increasing numbers of night trains that we are trying to reach, they are not hampered by the railway routes. There is we have to work on the connection between cargo trains and night trains. For example, there are some bottlenecks at the border to Denmark, but the offering of the night trains has been reduced, and we want to extend it to not even, to beyond to what it was before, and that we can also include the industry and regain them, because they have left the business, and the planning takes forever. And also we have to give some signals to the industry that we can have much nicer night trains now with soundproof cabins. And if you think how quiet the ICE is, and so you can envisage some night trains with a sort of cabin as in a hotel. Or so this is not working yet, because the industry has stopped planning, and they also need 6-7 years for the planning until it comes to the market. And now we need to give some signals to the big players for them to re-enter the business, and then also the routes that has to be planned, and also the cargo trains that has to do with competition. There are two things. One is that involvement of the citizen when it comes to border crossing connections. And let's have a look at that. For example, there is one bridge between Colmar and Freiburg, and that needs to be renovated, and nothing is happening. And how can the citizen be involved in this border crossing project? Citizen involvement with long-term projects in Stuttgart 21. We would have liked to have it much earlier with a better openness. There was always either you are for or against it. And so ultimately, we only had a huge wave at the end of people who were opposing it, but then there was no alternative left. And so therefore, it divided the entire city society, and therefore we need more citizen planning. It's also a new professional area, if you want, and so we have to involve the population and then come to fixed scenarios that still can be amended. And it takes sometimes 15 to 30 years to realize a project. So the people change as well over time, and it's not the same people who are involved to say then 30 years ago we had citizen involvement, but everything has changed, living together in the city, and when it comes to climate and how the money is being used. And so we have there's a lot of things we have to learn, and so you can never stop learning, especially when it comes to involvement of the citizens. And in Baden-Württemberg, we learned so much, also with the citizen councils, and those people who go and vote, they also have to become part of the citizen involvement. So it's an overall approach. And if we don't do it, then we can't learn anything. And so as I see it, on a European level, we are still very far at the beginning, very much at the beginning of it. And so when we have our European citizens networks, they are okay. But what we are talking about now, the togetherness in Europe, I think there is still a lot left to do. And also, when there were projects, tunnel projects that were built against the will of the citizens, it's still very difficult. I know it from small topics, small issues, when it comes to a very meaningful waste. That's waste production, and and we have to see whether it's energetically meaningful. And there are also various levels. Where can the citizens be involved? And maybe it's the overall European level or national level where it's meaningful. So it's not really that easy. And for us as Greens, we still have to learn, because of course it's we are somewhat on the left, and we are also present, in many areas, and we are trying to connect the citizens, but also go to the administration level. And so Baden-Württemberg sometimes can't decide a project without getting in contact with the French side. And so we need faster routes in Europe, and there will be construction sites again. And but also am responsible for forestry, and everybody has to get involved, and especially when you plan a new railway route, and that is really meaningful. And so it's very dramatic on site when you involve the people, and they are connected very much with their own landscape, and we don't want to leave things as they are at the moment, and with car mobility. And I wanted to come back to one other point. You mentioned the big players have to re-enter the railway transport and produce wagons again, and so it has to be economic too. And what does it mean? That demands more stimulation and support, but also planning policy and clear statements. What is happening? I mean, is there really this regulatory framework that changes the economic calculation as well? Well, I have to come back to 2 points where I unfortunately have to say not yet. Of course, we have it in the discourse. We look where we want to go with our mobility transport policy. It has to be climate neutral, but on the 2 levels that I worked on in the last 2 years, every time it went in the wrong direction. And we have to see that in general, of course, it's very different in every country, but you can still say overall, the roads are being supported and financed much more funded by the taxpayer than rail. For example, when it comes to European road fees, then that is true for railway, but not on the road, and therefore you still so the taxpayer is still supporting the tolls. And so this fair competition between the various transport modes, we have been working on this reaching this equality for years, but we have a trialogue between, for a European-wide toll system, and in France you already have it, and so we had to allow them for another 10 years because there isn't really the courage on a European level to say that these 2 systems, road and rail, are on the same level. And we have to get a lot of improvement for the rail in order to get somewhere. And also the renewal of the rail passenger rights, and they have to be improved, and so to change, to get to a change for the railway companies in a liberalized market. So the consumer needs very good information, which is hard to find. And secondly, they need their rights. And so we haven't managed to do that when it comes to ticketing, and also exerting the rights is something that we haven't reached yet, fulfilled yet. There are big plans in the EU what could be done, but when it comes to the individual legislative framework connection, national framework connection, that's where the member states insist on their minimum interest. And for me, I like to listen to Ursula von der Leyen. There are great speeches that she gives, and also they are very emotionally correct. She knows where she wants to go, but still the European Union doesn't really have the political effectiveness, and they never reach the high targets that they set themselves. And so it's a bit depressing, but again, the recommendation to all, have a look at the Mobility Atlas. There are a lot of things that you can find in terms of engagement and ways, and there is a lot of information that is being provided for the individual countries on how they can work together. And well, to provide information that can then lead to initiative from the European municipalities, for example. We have a couple of minutes, and I wanted to come to one topic. You mentioned passenger rights and ticketing. There are studies, I think they're also in the Mobility Atlas, that 10% of the young people buy their tickets via an app, 6% of the 50 to 65-year-olds, 50 to 65 years old. And what about border crossing ticketing? Only the information, where are the barriers, the obstacles in Europe? Why is it so difficult to connect the systems? Well, if I'm honest, it's probably due to the liberal approach that we had, and where we said all the national companies need to do is share their information and then make the offering via their apps, but we can see that it's not the case, and some are probably a little bit more competitive, but when it comes to border crossing issues, they are not present, and I have to go for different offerings. And so we are also exerting pressure on the Commission now. We say we need a European platform, and we need to make sure that the players on the European market have to use this data, and so that the user has everything available at the same time. And you can't say, okay, I wait a bit longer and release the information a bit later, etc. So this is where we have to see how we can do something with regard to the regulatory framework. And I envisage as such that in future I can say, okay, I want to be fast, I want to travel cheaply, and then the customer can say, okay, this is a great offering, and I have all these alternatives from A to B, and but at the moment it's all this individual information, and in the individual tickets, and I don't really get the information then on delays as well, and so maybe it's easy for somebody who travels a lot in their life, but train instead of flight has to be very practical. And of course, there was this EU app that tried to combine all these offerings, and not just flights, but and also in real time to make it possible to get this information. And as soon as my journey is a border crossing one, and of course the European Commission can do something here, and I would say it's still a bit of an ideological problem, and maybe they're still a bit afraid of the national states because they treat their national railways like their own babies. And but we still have to, a long way to go before we can talk of a European common market. And so Flixbus, for example, they're also entering the railway market now, and they also have night trains all the way to Sylt, and but we have to make room for this information. So there is a question that we have left open, and it's the last one, Anna. And then our time is almost over, and we have talked about half of what we wanted to talk about. And it's a question by Desiree, the question of the cost-free public transport. How realistic is it to have cost-free public transport at some point in the future? Would it change the behavior also of people? The background is well, change behavior, can it only be gained or reached by the price? Or I would be very happy if we would have a 365 euro ticket for every big city in Europe. And it would also be psychologically important, to use the metro, and for €1, and I can use a whole network. And if there would be, for example, a social ticket where the price is reduced by half, and so it's I think we have to enter more into these offerings where, for example, people move to a city to give them a month for free, and free transport, and people have moved, have a new partner, have a new child. This is when you newly orientate yourself, and in the first couple of months, if you don't get them on board, then you have lost them for the next couple of years. And also prices are not an honest picture. For example, the car, there are a lot of costs that are not included really in these calculations, and the railway transport is financed a lot by the individual countries, and there is an imbalance when it comes to prices. And of course, it has to we have to make sure that it's not cheaper than it can be realistically done. And of course, the road infrastructure is also a very expensive issue, and but we have to talk about solidarity. And if we break too hard, then we probably don't do the right things. And if we make an offering that's based on the existing network, then we can see that it can work. And for example, somebody who let go of their car in Stuttgart got a huge subsidy for buying an e-bike, and we can see that we can also see that we could give back the parking spaces, and also the car drivers say that it's nice that you can sit outside again, and of course, then you have to include people with their big e-bikes in your planning. And I think to make these concrete offerings is very normal. And when 1/3 of the children in the kita is being transported in this way, then it's quite attractive. And you have to make these novel offerings and then create the infrastructure with good bicycle lanes, so you have to work little by little.
This does not only apply to Stuttgart, but also for other cities. Anna, this was quite an interesting lunchtime with you and all of you who participated and joined us here. So thank you very much. And we will meet again, hopefully. And Anna, I wish you a successful election campaign. And I wish everyone a nice summer. All the best to you. See you.